Chcieliśmy Państwa serdecznie powitać w imieniu Narodowego Centrum Kultury. Naszym dzisiejszym gościem jest profesor Giovannim Schiuma, autor książki The Value of Arts for Business. Dzisiejszy wykład będzie oscylował wokół książki, ale też proszę nie czuć się w żaden sposób zagrożony. Można zadawać pytania profesorowi. Konstrukcja jest taka, że profesor przez początek będzie chwila będzie prezentacja, natomiast potem zapraszamy właśnie do dyskusji. Jest również z nami pani Agata Balon. Pani Agata jest studentką, ale też i asystentką profesora i będzie nam pomagała w dzisiejszej dyskusji. Także pani start now.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't speak any Polish, so I've not understood what Alexander just said. And I'm really pleased to be here for different reasons. I have a very strong feeling and attachment to Poland. Also because I have a son which is half Polish, so there is one more reason to be attached to Poland. And so I really accepted this invitation. The idea today is not to give a lecture, a formal lecture about what is arts and business, but more to have an open conversation. So I put together some slides, but mainly as a way to articulate this conversation. So I hope that there will be questions from you, from the audience, curiosity. I'm sure that when you look at the title, Bridging Culture and Business, in your mind you had different ideas, different questions, something intriguing you about how culture and business can work together. I've been going through the list of the participants, and I saw that there are mainly people coming from the cultural sector, but also some people from the business sector. Of course, we are here trying to discuss why these two words should be working together, why culture and business should collaborate. So basically, well, just a short introduction. I think Alexander already introduced me. I'm based at the moment at the University of the Arts London in UK. But as you probably can see from or understand from my accent, I am Italian, and also from my name and surname. So at the moment I'm suffering, or I've been suffering in UK in the last winter, very grey, and I was really pleased to arrive in Poland and to find nice weather welcoming me. But apparently it's changing again. Anyway, when we think about bridging culture and business and try to understand how these two words can work together, the first key question to understand, I believe, is what is the value of culture from business point of view? Because the point is that in order to foster this collaboration, business needs to understand what is the value of culture, in particular for their own sake. But when we think about, in general, what is the value of culture, and I think it's important to start from this reflection. In my opinion, we can identify 4 fundamental values that explain why we are so interested in engaging culture and why basically we should be fostering and supporting the development of a relationship between culture and the business. The first traditional value is what I call the intrinsic value. Why we are interested in culture, why do you are interested in culture, why we experience and we cannot live in our life without culture. Basically because culture produces its own pleasure for its own sake. So we is a kind of deep need for us as a human being to express, to use culture as a way to express our feeling, as a way to communicate with other people, as a way to feel human. So arts culture is basically a key dimension of our life, and the value of arts is an intrinsic value. So according to this point of view, arts should be supported by government, culture should be supported by government because it is important itself, independently from the kind of contribution it can provide to organization, to society, just because it is a human-based expression. So that is the first fundamental value of arts, and that is the first fundamental reason why we should be supporting the arts particularly from government point of view. Then there is another dimension of value, which is more related to the economic dimension, is the economic value of arts. For the economic value of arts, what I mean is the use of arts in order to support and develop the arts market. Corporations, individuals buy arts, hang their different picture in their own house, buy installation or sculpture, whatever. So there is an art market, and actually it is interesting because the art market is a market that didn't see any recession. Even during the financial crisis, the art market didn't have any crisis. Actually, has been growing, has been considered as an important asset to be invested in. So there is arts as a market, and then the third dimension, when we think about the value of arts, is the industry value of arts. For industry, I mean that arts, culture, has been one of the main drivers for the development of a new industry, particularly in Europe, which is the culture and creative industry. And particularly, as I was saying, in the Western country, in the last years, there's been a lot of attention related to experiential economy on the role that arts and culture can play as a way to develop new kind of sector. And then finally, and this is where I will be focusing more my attention, I believe there is the fourth dimension of value of arts, and this is what I call the instrumental value of arts. For instrumental value of arts, what I mean is that arts can be used within organization, and particularly within the business, as a way to support the development of the organization, as a way to support and foster the development of innovation capacity. So basically, arts from instrumental point of view can be used as a way to improve how organization, how business is basically operating. And from that point of view, arts, and this is my view, can become a very important driver for the development of what I call the 21st century organization. All these four dimensions of value represent the four pillars of what we can call the culture and creative economy, which is basically becoming one of the main economy, or it has become one of the main dimensions to focus on at the European level, a Western country, as most of the manufacturing production is moving towards the developing country. As I was saying, when I think about the instrumental value of the arts, my fundamental assumption can be summarized in these artworks that an artist has drawn for me. So my fundamental idea, playing around the words, is that art is basically also the heart of change within the organization. So basically, using art and culture within the organization, it is possible to develop a completely new way of running the business, new ways, new methodology, new tools for developing innovation, for developing new categories of product to engage people at different levels. And basically what I've been doing in my book is to lay down the foundation of how, from theoretical point of view, from conceptual point of view, how arts can be applied within organizational context in order to support change, transformation, and the enhancement of business performance. What is the relationship between arts, culture, and business? This is how I see the relationship between arts and business. On one side, the business, on the other side, the cultural organization, looking at each other and thinking that they don't have nothing to offer each other. So basically, a huge gap between these two words. And actually, it is interesting because the only way these two words tend to relate each other is arts asking to business to support cultural initiatives, arts initiative, and business usually is just happy to provide some sponsorship, but doesn't want nothing to do directly or doesn't want any form of real engagement and partnership with the cultural worlds. So there is a big gap between these two words. And when we think about how arts and business can work together, culture and business can work together, we need to understand what are the benefits and the mutual benefits of working together. In the management discipline, there's been a lot of attention on arts management. Arts management is about bringing the business principle in the arts context. What I believe is that also arts has a lot to offer to the business, and this is what I call arts-based management. And this is the new discipline that I'm trying to build, to create, starting from my book and from my research that I'm currently developing at the University of Arts London. And the idea is that arts-based management is all about what are the principles, what is the knowledge, what are all the dimensions that the arts, the culture can bring within the organization in order to support organizational development, business development. So the idea is somehow to bridge this gap, understanding, clarifying why and how the arts, culture can work together with business for mutual benefits. Of course, there is a lot of skepticism around this collaboration. When I talk with the business people, when I teach the MBA students, usually they have a kind of gut feeling that arts culture can provide benefits, but they are somehow scared of building this relationship, of engaging the relationship with business, with arts. When I talk with the culture people or organization, cultural organization, they don't like the concept of business because they think that we are artists, we are people from the culture, we don't want nothing to do with the business, and the only thing that we want from business is to provide some money to do some our own arts or cultural activities, but we don't want to get involved with the business because somehow we don't want to have our hands dirty. So there is a lot of skepticism. In reality, what I'm trying to advocate is that these two worlds needs to start to work more together for many different reasons. Well, this is what I believe is arts and business should be intersecting, should be overlapping, should be not working as a separate fields, but they should explore how they can be integrated in each other, and this is where I see the application and the collaboration between arts and business. In order to give you some basic ideas of what we are talking about here in terms of bridging this gap between the culture and business, I will very quickly go through 3 main points that helps to explain what I'm talking here about. First, I will try to address why I believe arts, culture is important for business. Why organizations, both public and private organizations, should be engaging more with the cultural sector. Then what I mean for the use of arts and culture within organizational context, and then finally how this can be developed. And then hopefully around this question, I hope I will be able to stimulate some of your reflection and then to get some question around these points. When we think about why business should be engaging with arts, well, there is first of all a fundamental philosophical reason. If we look at the development of the business in the last 100 years, in the last century, these businesses, they have evolved as a very mechanicistic, rational, positivistic organization, kind of mechanist organization. The human dimension has been fundamentally disregarded, or at least has been not valued as it should be. So the first fundamental philosophical reason for integrating culture, arts within business, within organization, is because we need to humanize organization. We need to realize that organization exists in order to create value for people, and this is not only for the business organization, it's actually for all organizations, also in the public sector. So to recognize, to acknowledge the centrality of people, both within the organization and outside the organization. And it is important to stress that also the successful businesses of the last decades, like Apple, Google, or Facebook, all these new businesses, the secret of their success has been related very much to their capacity of recognizing the centrality of people and trying to build around the needs, the wants of people, new forms of services, new forms of products, and basically recognizing this centrality in terms of key features of human dimension, like emotion, experience, and so on, that I will very soon talk about. So the first philosophical fundamental reason why do we need to integrate the arts within the organization is because we need to recognize the central human being, both within and external to the organization, and then to humanize the organization. But then, from very practical point of view, there are different reasons that explain, that helps to make sense of why we should be integrating culture in business. There are managerial imperatives, there are business imperatives, and also social imperatives. So there are 3 categories. When I talk about managerial imperatives, I mean how organizations are run today. how managers, top manager, middle manager are governing their organization. So the kind of challenges that nowadays managers have within their organization are completely new compared to the past. Nowadays, the main points, the main challenges for managers is how to make sure that people are engaged in what they do, how they can make sure that people put their passion, how the people can explicate their innovative capacity. So the challenges from management point of view is not only to govern the organization in a very rationalistic way, providing rules, providing procedures, but it's very much about creating an environment for avoiding the paralysis of thinking of people, as a way to catalyze their emotion, as a way to disclose the capacity of human being. And this is what, again, for example, Google has been able to do, or other organizations. This is what Microsoft is more recently trying to do. So the first management imperative is about transforming how organizations are governed, moving from a rationalistic, scientific, engineeristic approach towards a more human base which recognizes the human features, and through this recognition is able to explicate and develop new capacity, new competencies that are related to the ability of being imaginative, of being innovative, to be resilient. Many organizations are dealing with stress within the organization. Many organizations need today to continuously innovate and get continuously feedbacks, new ideas from people. Well, how this can be done? The way is to create new environment, and is there that arts can provide a benefit. The second imperative is around the business, around economic dimension. More and more what we buy as consumer we don't buy any more products, but we tend to buy more and more experiences. What we try to buy is emotions. Whenever we buy a product, when we buy a technology, when we buy whatever we buy, we look for intangible value into the products. How organization can create this intangible value? Again, arts, culture can provide the principles, the guidelines for creating this intangible value, and basically being able to understand how can organization engage the customers and more generally the stakeholders at different levels. So from business point of view, organizations are realizing that they need to understand not only how to design new product, not only how to market their product, but to understand how they can create new experiences within the product. And in fact, when you go nowadays in a lot of the showrooms, it is not anymore a shopping center, but it's more and more a place where you are immersed in an experience, where arts start to play a different role in terms of interior design, in terms of colors, in terms of even smell. So there is more and more attention about the senses. And all these senses, how to generate these senses and govern these senses, is where arts play an important role. And then there are some social imperatives, because actually we were last week with, there are some colleagues, friends here in the room. We were in Amsterdam discussing that the future is not what used to be for the cultural sector. And we had one of the keynote speakers addressing some of the issues around the social challenges, moving toward fascism, the kind of loss of some fundamental values. And then also from social point of view, the arts can play an important role to catalyze the attention again on what are the key values, again recognize and recall the centrality of human being. So from practical point of view, when we discuss why arts is important for business, the reasons are related to the need of managing the organization in a different way, understanding how to develop new forms of competence. From business point of view, because more and more we are living in what is an experiential economy, and in experiential economy what we sell, what we design are experiences and intangible value. And then from social point of view, we are dealing with new kind of challenges that require a new way of catalyzing the attention and the social cooperation. But from practical point of view, what do we mean about the application of the arts in business? Well, my point is, and this is the basic idea, this is a little bit conceptual, so the basic idea is that when we think about the use of arts or culture within the organization, we don't think necessarily, we are talking about both about the use of arts coming from the arts world and also the use of artifacts that are based on arts. So basically, we can use arts within the organization for example, this is just an example, for training and people development, and then we can use a play from Shakespeare to reflect on some behaviors of the leaders. Or we can use, for example, within an organization in order to understand, for example, how nurses treat and manage relationship with their patients, we can use theater forum in order to create and let them understand how patients are living their experience. We can use, for example, sculpture or photography as a way to represent the values of an organization and then to make tangible the culture of an organization. So what we are talking here are potential examples of how the arts can be deployed within an organizational context to address some specific issues. So what we are talking here is basically what I consider the aesthetic power of arts. So the use of arts in business, in organization, is about applying aesthetic technology. What is about, when we talk about arts, and again, not necessarily arts from the arts world, but also the use of artifacts that are built by, for example, in some organization, with the use of arts, employees are engaged in the building artifacts or creating joint paintings in order to express themselves, in order to communicate and cooperate in different way. And this can be done either for team building purposes or can be done in order to stimulate a reflection around some particular issue of the organization. So in all these cases, the idea is to use arts as a way to engage the aesthetics of an organization. And what do I mean for aesthetics? What is basically the capacity of engaging our senses. So aesthetics is not in terms of embellishment, but here this is aesthetics as a Vico. The philosopher Vico has understood the concept of aesthetic. How do we perceive the world? How we make sense of the world using our senses, our six senses. So the arts, the power of arts is that because they are able to engage their senses. And that is where, using arts and culture within the organization, it is possible to create different environment, different experience for employees. It is possible to engage the customer and the stakeholders at different level. So from a conceptual point of view, what the culture and arts are able to do is to organize and manage and handle this aesthetic and then experiential dimension that the traditional business tools are not able to do. So arts, when we think about what is arts and culture in business, we are basically talking about the use of these instruments as a way to activate aesthetic experiences. So experiences that engage the senses of human beings. And then how arts can be applied within the organization. And here is what I call arts-based initiatives. So when business want to engage, and when I say business here, I don't necessarily mean private businesses. There are a lot of organizations, for example, healthcare organizations, hospitals, or a public organization that today are engaging with the cultural sector on a different level because they want to address some of the issues. For example, one of the main problems in the public sector is that people are completely disengaged emotionally in what they do. But what they do, particularly in the public sector, what they do is most of the case when they go in their organization to switch off their emotional brain and all their passion is somewhere else. So basically, these people in this sector, in the public sector, the problem is that it is not that the problem is not that they don't know what to do. The problem is to make sure that they are engaged enough to do what they should be doing and actually give the best of themselves in what they're doing, understand that they are serving the community at large. So in this case, for example, how it is possible to create a different feeling, a different engagement of the people within this organization. The traditional approach based on incentives then on an extrinsic motivation is not work anymore. What is important to do is to create an intrinsic motivation, to let people really understand why they are doing what they do, and particularly to help them to discover what they love about what they do. Unfortunately, there are very few people that in this world they can do what they really love to do. And these people are the culture people, the academics, and the soccer players that earn also a lot of money, and they can go with the veline in Italy in particular. So apart these people, all the other people are very unfortunate. They have to pay the bills, and then they find themselves doing jobs that not necessarily they love. So how can we create a different environment where people really can have a better working life, can have a better well-being in what they do? All these dimensions are extremely important, and the traditional business tools are not able to do that. Culture, arts can provide a lot of insights to make a better life within the organizational context in many different ways. Either working, actually, one of the companies based, Italian company, which has production units here in Poland. I don't remember well because it's a small village, impossible to pronounce for an Italian, but it's so small. This company is Elica Group. They produce kitchen oven, and they have just a manufacturing company here in Poland. And what they've been doing, so it's a very traditional manufacturing company with people, with workers working on the machine all the time. So what they've been doing is with a Polish director, which I don't remember the name, but basically what they've done, they simulate that the overall company was playing as an orchestra, and actually they've been engaged in using some instruments during their work activities. Initially, everyone was quite skeptical. What we are doing here? What is this? At the beginning, there was a lot of resistance, also from cultural point of view. We try to imagine people from the workers' people that had to play a trumpet or play a small drum. So they were kind of skeptical about that. But then, as slowly they get engaged, they start to enjoy. So there was a playfulness dimension, and this is another thing that we forgot to do. As we grow up, we forgot how to play. Well, the cultural people are always good. They always remember, and they always have a lot of fun in whatever they do. But the people, usually they forgot how to play. So in the organization, we don't play. So the playfulness dimension, the emotional dimension, so basically they started to experience their working activities in a completely different way, to see the working activity in a different perspective, and then to discover also what they like about that working activities, and to recognize that they were working as a kind of orchestra altogether. So there were different dimensions: the use of arts as a metaphor to address what they are doing, the use of arts to rediscover their connection with what they do, but also the use of arts as a way to be more in touch with themselves. So the arts in that case has been used from the company, Elica, as an instrument to try to engage people at different levels. This kind of project is what I call arts-based initiative. Arts-based initiative is basically the use of culture, is the use of arts as a way to address specific business and organizational issues. And this business issue can be any kind of business issue. It can be around the people and training and development. And then here we have the training of skills for people around communication, about creativity, about cooperation, about co-creation. So there are many kinds of skills that are typical of the cultural world and are lacking in the business world. But also the arts can be used as a way to shape better working environment. And then again, the arts can be used as a way to create a different work environment using interior design, but also creating experiences that are engaging the people in what they do, for ergonomics around the equipment, the machine, but even incorporating then also this dimension in the everyday life of the organization. And then arts can be used as a way to address organizational issues. Again, I was mentioning before culture. When we talk within an organization about culture, what is culture for an organization? Usually the managers, what they do, they find the list of values of an organization in a booklet. But who is reading that booklet? No one. So how can you make these values more tangible? How can you help the people to understand what are the values, what we are here for? And again, our culture can have that role. Or arts can be used, culture can be used as a way to raise the reputation of the organization, to raise the image of the organization, to think about the identity of the organization, and here is what is the idea is to move the relationship between arts and business beyond what is the simple relationship about sponsorship. It's about not just connecting the logo of a company with the logo of a cultural organization, but it's about building a partnership and understanding why I want to collaborate with that heavy metal band. Because that heavy metal band is more related to my way as a company to see the future and operate in my innovative way. So it's about building this connection between the identity, the image, and the culture of the organization. And then finally, arts can be used as a way to design new product, to incorporate intangible value within the product. And then here, in the last years, we have been seeing a lot of examples of the use of design in particular as a way to shape completely new products and think about new products. And actually with Agata, yesterday you were showing me the Quirk. No, there's a Quirky. There's a website with creative people that are able to provide new solutions. So when we talk about arts-based initiative, we talk about how arts culture can be applied within the organization. We are talking about projects that are practically designed and implemented to solve specific organizational and business issues. Of course, in order to do that, it is important that this project have to be appropriately designed and implemented. So using arts in business doesn't mean that we take artists, we bring artists in the organization, or we hang pictures within the manufacturing unit. It's about creating and shaping the right form of arts. It's about shaping the right use of the arts in order to solve the problem. So there is a way of operating. Is not just bringing together artists and bringing the artists within the organization, but there is a way of designing and implementing and then assessing the use of culture and arts within the organization. That means that we need, and this is what is happening around the world at the moment, we need new professionals. These professionals are kind of facilitators, arts architects. They can come from the cultural world, or they can come from the business world, or they can be team working together, that are able to understand both the dimension of culture and arts, but also the problems of the organization. And they're working together, design the right solution in order to solve the issues of the organization. Yes?
Do you think we already reached the critical mass in doing so, in this transformation of culturally based management?
No. This is just, we are just at the beginning. This is just the beginning.
In the UK or Poland? Because in the UK, we are many years. Or Europe.
This is very good. This was one of the questions for you. What is the situation of Poland when we talk about these things? Well, I've been invited here for the first time in Łódź. I have my friend and colleague Agata here. 2 years ago now, and you organized a conference around arts and business dimension. And we found that there were some organizations that were starting to experience the use of arts in a business, but really at kind of superficial level. So where we are at the moment, we are at just really the beginning. We are just at the beginning. There is a basic understanding that arts culture can provide benefits for organizations and businesses. Some organizations are starting to experiment this, but we are really at the beginning. So there is not a structured approach. And that is the reason also why I was mentioning this is what I'm trying to do as an academic, as a researcher, is to build this new discipline, to collect new evidences. But this is emerging. So I was recently in South Africa, in Johannesburg, where BASA, Business and Arts South Africa, they are trying to work and fostering this collaboration. In Korea, there is also, from the ministry, a lot of attention on this dimension. It's actually quite interesting why Korea. Korea is a country that in the last 50 years has experienced a boom from economic point of view, but they are workaholic. People there in Korea are like machine. They work 12 hours a day. They don't know anything else than working. The problem for them is that at some point they recognize that they need to somehow start to introduce some things to make these people a little bit more happier. And they thought, well, arts can be a way. So in that level, they are using arts as a just basic way to start to build new forms of emotion. But again, it's just the peak of the iceberg. In Europe, there is a lot of attention, particularly in the northern European countries, where there is a much more acknowledgement of this approach. For example, I've been working with the Ministry of Culture in Finland, and at the moment they give for themselves a strategy to become the best country by 2020 to have the best work environment. To do that, they are using arts. So they decide to use arts and to address the point of managing emotion within the organization as a key dimension within the organization. Denmark, they have long tradition of engagement between arts and business. There are different organizations that have been, because again, a lot of corporations have been using. In UK, a lot of attention around design and service design, and also a little bit around arts-based management. Italy and France are different countries because they are different cultural approach. Poland, in Poland, actually, it is interesting because, and this is also the reason why the National Cultural Center has invited me, because there is an interest, there is a tension, there is a kind of feeling that a culture can play a role within the country for different reasons.
I think in Poland, the new initiatives really provide those attitudes, those culturally determined attitudes, really, because the market needs this. And what's kind of interesting that it comes directly from the bottom up. Corporations they don't use it, but mostly it's pretty common right now within the small, units, small businesses.
Well, this is a quite important point because you are stressing, pointing out this very important point that there is a kind of tension internally to the organization to address other issues that are somehow able to engage people at a different level. So there is one way is how people feel within the organization and what they need to do different things or to explore different dimensions of how they work within the organization. But then also there is another way to see from more macroeconomic point of view, it is how should we look at to the economic structure of this country, what is this country is producing, and what is the position of this country in terms of producing the new generation of product that the market is requiring. So is this country producing experiential-based product, or is still producing products that are part of the old-fashioned industry, the traditional industry, which is the traditional manufacturing industry? My view is that we are still in this stage, probably in Poland, and then one of the key challenge for the economic development is also to understand how can we develop within this country new forms of industry that also exploit or use culture as a way to create new product and then be more competitive. And that this means around both developing new industry, but also improving what in this country is done from industrial point of view.
I'd like to ask a question around experiential-based products. Could you say more about that? Because it sounds like an interesting notion.
Okay, I will give you my preferred example. I drive Ducati. You know Ducati? Okay. I drive Ducati. There are, this is my preferred example that usually I use when we talk about experience. There are only two bikes in the world that you can recognize them without seeing them. It is Ducati and Harley Davidson. Why? Because the noise of the engine is really peculiar. So for bikers, that noise is an experience, is a sound, is a music. For other people, maybe is a noise. But so what they have done, both the Ducati that has a specific engine, they have even patented this noise. Why? Because again, when you buy the bike, you don't buy just a piece of machine. If you want to buy a perfect bike that will never break, that will never give you the best guarantee, you buy a BMW or you buy a Japanese bike. But if you want to buy an experience, if you want to buy a passion, you buy the Ducati or you buy the Harley Davidson. When we buy coffee and you go to and you buy Illy, Illy was the first company in Italy, this was back to 30, 40 years ago, to design special cup using artists that they were designing special coffee cup. Why? Because the idea from Illy, that I'm talking again, 40 years ago, Italians, as you probably know, we go in the bar, we take the shot of coffee and we go away. Maybe, I don't know, in Russia they get vodka, I don't know in Poland. In Italy we take coffee. So the point was that the design coffee cup is that to create an experience around the consumption of the coffee and to build and rise the identity, the image of the company, which basically at the end of the day, what is a product which is a commodity, coffee is a commodity, very low price commodity, but they've been able to charge higher premium in the product because they've been able to create an experience, an identity, an image of a product of high quality. And they, of course, invest also in the high quality of the product, but all the overall experience they've created is important. Apple. When Apple a few years ago came out with the shops, Apple shops, the idea of Apple shops was not about selling products. It was all about you going in the shop and experience the product. Then eventually you can buy the product. But the idea was to build an experience. And so on and so forth. Another example, video games platform. I don't know if you play with the Wii platform, no, the one that you really interact in video games. So in the case of the Wii platform, there is nothing from technological point of view that is novel. What they've done in that case, co-design, they've been observing how people use this technology when they play video games. So what do you do when you play video games usually? No, you are in front of your TV and then you start to move yourself. Then they realize that what people want is really an experience of being in the video game. And then they come out. So these are just some examples. But then also when we buy a suit, when we buy whatever, also the restaurants is more and more about experience. It's not only the consumption of the product. And this is because the advanced economies are moving their needs from the product to the function of the product to the intrinsic value to the product to the experience that you get through the product. And this is becoming increasingly important.
I have a question, or I have more something like a doubt about what you're saying.
Yeah, it's good.
Because what you say here is not, normally it's not governed by artists, but it's governed by marketing, you know. Understanding the needs, or understanding, you know, what people like to sense, what people like to, you know, have. It's all marketing, you know. Do you really see the difference? What will be the difference between marketing researchers who are, you know, researching the people's needs, what they want to experience when they interact with the product, and what will be the difference between this and artists who make the same? Do you really think that artists will be better in this than marketers?
The marketing is the first discipline in the business world that have realized the importance of running and engaging the emotion of people, and then how to communicate. And indeed, the marketing has been the first one to use the... Please.
I think in the future you will not be able to extinguish one from another. The cultural issue and marketing. It's coming into this point of singularity, because this is one. Maybe the person does not really feel.
Your point is what really I was now trying to articulate, in the sense that in the marketing field, a lot of the people working in marketing field comes from the cultural sector. And so there are people from design, people from culture, that they understand how to engage, people that work with the communication dimension. But what I'm talking here, and this is important, is not only about marketing. And so I don't want you to be misunderstood that we are talking here about just selling or marketing or communicating. What we are talking here is about creating experience, and this is more important nowadays, not only external, but within the organization. So how can you create a context where people have a different perception of what they do? From that point of view, that is where, so it's about enlarging the dimension of the application of culture, moving from the marketing, where in the last 20 years there's been already an application. So the use of images for marketing campaign, Benetton, using this picture or photo, very provocative to create provocation, which is typical of the artist, and using actually photograph from the artist, and there was marketing. But what we are talking here is about building an experience and engaging in managing the experience. So for example, how you run also the experience at the front desk and help people to manage, that is nothing to do with the marketing, maybe it's with selling, it's true, but it's also about building the empathy. So how can we understand the empathy of other people? Well, actors can teach you how to feel the feelings. Of course, there are psychological, sociological dimensions, but they can somehow help you. This is true also in hospital when you have the relationship between the nurse and patients. But for example, again, in some hospitals in America are experiencing how the use of the capacity of observing a painting can improve the quality and the capacity of doctor of recognizing in X-ray pictures defects, and they prove that statistically, if they have been trained in understanding and reading differently. So the point is that the culture is providing skills. So what is, if you want, from a human point of view, the point? When we think about ourselves, whatever you do in your life, do you use always your rational thinking, or you use your emotion, or you balance potentially both of them? You tend to balance. As human beings, we are made of rationality, which is rules, procedure, how we operate, but we are made also of emotion, of feelings. At the end, the best decision is where we are able to combine these two dimensions. And this is where we are with the organization. The last 100 years, the organization has been built as more machine dimension. Now maybe I could make a lecture around the management, business management, and then discuss all the different business models, but they've been disregarded completely the emotional side. Steve Jobs used to say, what is important for me is not that the person is just a good technician, but I want to understand if this person can fall in love with Apple. The concept there is very clear. So when we are talking here about the experience, it's not just the marketing, but it's what we create within the organization, and it's also how we engage with the social dimension out there. Artists can help to build this experience, to design this experience. But, and that is the other point that I was making, it is also important to build new professions. So if you ask me, can artists design arts-based initiative for the organization? The answer is no. Because they are not equipped to do that. They don't know how to design, what to do. They will come out with their artistry capacity. Because they are artists. They can do the artful. But they don't know how to link that capacity to the problem of the organization. And this link is where reside the capacity of a new profession that needs to be built. So for example, one suggestion for, and this is also the discussion that we are having, and also in Europe, it is important to train some artists or to train some people to understand how to use the power of culture to address some specific problem. And then the point of instrumentalization. I apply arts as an instrument. And then arts can be, in that case, instrumentalized, but I'm not talking about manipulation. So the artist still keep the artist doing the thing, but with the power of the application. So it's clear. Any other question? Please.
I'm worried with what you're saying, but I'm somehow confused with your use of word art in this housekeeping thing.
Yeah.
So if you could elaborate a bit more why you use arts, because for me at this point it's rather sounds like applying it to basically our six senses and how we experience everything, and therefore using the creativity of artists to pitch to our six senses and therefore experience, to get enhanced experience.
The concept of arts here is using a very... the concept of arts here is the point is not to, I don't want to define arts because this is a problem that has been not solved in the last 2,000 years. But arts is, for me, is the aesthetic experience. So there is a lot of literature that say arts can be considered as the aesthetic experience. So how we engage with the arts. So what is important about arts, because there are different interpretations of the arts from institutional point of view. There are art people that can judge if something is a piece of art or not. But what is important, and that is more the experiential dimension, we judge art when something is able to engage our senses, and then we love it. So I use arts as the concept to address the aesthetic experience that we have around either proper artistic artworks or around artifacts. How this can be deployed, what is the difference within, with you were touching the point. Arts design or design thinking is one dimension of the arts. And design thinking actually, and I know because you are both students from CSM, and is more about still using a more kind of logical approach of co-creation starting from user-centric approach. Arts goes beyond that. Arts is also able to anticipate trends, is also able to look at in the future, but include the design thinking.
I think I have like a million questions or issues, but I would like to address the. I'm a cultural manager, so I'm just born because I'm working both in culture and I have to do the management. So I think in the profession of mine, these two worlds somehow meet. And I see two. I very much appreciate what you're saying, but. I'm a practical person, so what I'm looking for, I'm not finding when you're an academic, so this is obvious, but what I'm looking for is the practice, are the examples, how it works. Because from what I know, from my experience, from what I'm trying to find out, I see two very big difficulties. One is on the side of the business, and one is on the side of culture, or arts, would be better to say. So, we are mostly cultural people here, and I think your speech should be addressed to the business people more, because many people in culture are very much aware of what you are saying, so they know it. In our opinion, it's the business that doesn't realize the fact that culture could be, that arts could be useful in business. And on the arts, the difficulty on the arts point of view is artists very often don't like to be used. They prefer to stay, to have the arts for the art's sake and not for the use of, I don't know, enhancing a product, relationships, anything. Just, they don't like this moment when they feel their work, their art, their expression is used to some, with their conscience, with their total conscience, but they don't like the fact that their art is somehow applied. So, how could you relate to that?
It's a good point. The practice dimension, I go in the order of your reflection. The scope of this presentation was just to open the conversation. Of course, I could run this workshop for 3 days in a row and give a different example, go in detail of the different tools, how to design the initiative, the assessment, and so forth. So this was mainly about sparking the conversation. It is true that how I've been articulating is more a message that is conveyed towards business rather than towards culture, because also how I've been structuring the research and my activity is arts-based management, what the arts can do for business. So is the culture for business. It is true that the culture has a kind of awareness of what they can do for business, but it is also true that they have not a structured approach. So they have a kind of feeling that they can do a lot, but how, why, and how, this is something that is very slippery. So the point is also to structure this project. And actually, so the point is that in the cultural world, we need to have more structured thinking I don't want to say, again, some rationality will help. And then finally, about the benefits of cultural organization. Well, also cultural organization, I mean, it's true what you are saying, that a lot of artists don't want to be used. But at the same time, I believe, and that is, this is something else that I stress, the collaboration between arts and business has to be based on sharing some fundamental principles. And that is why it's very important, from philosophical point of view, to start with the acknowledgement the use of arts in business is about humanizing the organization. It's about celebrating human life. What is art? Art is about celebrating human life. So my point is that if artists realize that they want to, because otherwise they live in their own world. But if they want to contribute to make a better world, well, they need to use the arts in order to make a better world. And sometimes making a better world means to make sure that the people working somewhere can work a little bit better because they spend most of their life there. So if they can build a sculpture and they will be expressing themselves, we are not saying that usually they are free to express themselves, but that sculpture can be somehow used around as in different way to improve the quality of life within the organization, then that is the point. And then there are different categories working together. So there is the artist that can be the pure artist that do the pure art, does whatever he needs to do. Then there are arts facilitators that are able to make sense of these arts for the purpose of the organization. And then there is whatever the organization that knows its own problem and wants to understand how they can get some value for that relationship. So there are different professionals here working together in order to build this. But then, and then I conclude with this, also from cultural point of view, also artists and cultural organization need to realize, yeah, well, I don't want to say, but somehow they should also, and this is something, as I say, there is a there is skepticism in both words. I thought this was my premise. Artists, they don't want to get their hands dirty with business, and business say these artists are just loose and they don't have nothing to do. In reality, these two words, they should come to work more together because both can get benefits. And also arts can get some benefits. And this is something else that can be discussed further. What are the benefits of this collaboration?
So my question to point your what you just said would be, this is a bit provocative. I have somehow my answers, but I would like to hear yours. Who should start this cooperation? Where the initiative should come from? Because it doesn't happen just by itself.
No. In some cases, this comes from organizations that play a catalyst role, like an interface, then tends to be agency from the government, or could be arts incubators that have kind of double understanding. And in some cases, it comes from, most of the cases, from some organizations, from some CEO that have an understanding, and they have also money to invest and to experiment. And in some small cases comes from arts organizations and then artists. But that is the role that should be played by these organizations working at the interface. The cultural education, I mean, the problem of the arts and cultural education is quite a big issue, and actually in many countries there should be more attention to introduce more arts education in the schools. But the point here, we have to be careful because otherwise there could be some misunderstanding. The idea is not to make artists a little bit business people and business people a little bit artists. Even if there is more and more attention on training, particularly business, from different point of view, and even to rethink the MBA programs. Because how the mindset of managers has been designed and built in the business school is very rationalistic, very engineeristic based. And there's been a lack of attention on developing other kind of skills. And for example, now, even at the CSM, we are thinking and designing a new MBA program where all these dimensions will be integrated. What it is important is of course to create a kind of basic dimension in the educational system that can inform the culture dimension and the business dimension, so people can have can be proficient in both languages, or at least to have an understanding of the both words. But then on one hand we should have artists that do artistry and they are artists. On the other hand, business. And then what I'm suggesting here is that we need also to develop new organizations, new professionals that are able to connect these words. These are gatekeepers. So they are professionals that are able to design.
Like scale-based competition. Scale-based competition means that the big figures, big data really matter. It's the same with the technology, the IT technology and the operational technologies. It's really important. And what this scale-based competition teaches us? First of all, industry life cycles really shorten. And this process is really deepening. So it means that from the starting point of technology revolution or any sort of revolution or breakthrough point, we don't have more than 25 years from starting stage to the closing stage. So all the changes should happen in this short period of time. And at the end of every stage is balance and alliance. You have just 3 up to 4 global leaders that take the whole state, strategically important state, and the same number of leaders in 9 types of niches. And the question is, where is the place for arts in those global leading corporations that are really very hungry for profits and then creating growth and profitable growth, or in those niches that supplement this big business. So this is really a very important issue, because those global businesses have such a feeling that they want to put us as a standardized experience through the big data, I like what is like, and this is the main solution, how to navigate our sentiments through the solutions that are not customized to our individual preferences, but to the big data. And there is a lot of very strong pressures in all business parts to be there. But I also have another experience. This is related to global executive learning. I'm active in a global executive learning network from the early 90s, starting from General Electric experience, when they moved from the Philharmonic Orchestra to the jazz band, when you have different leaders. And all those leaders have something interesting to tell, but they have to be responsible for what they promise. It's not just a kind of genius artist that you should follow. No, you should be responsible. If you propose something, you should be accountable for the global results and all the outcomes and impacts of your proposal. So that's why all those global leaders have to be very carefully selected. And they are also trained in the way that you suggested. I've been, for instance, in the Museum of People in Nice, and we have been put with a group of global execs in front of some carvings or paintings without a title. And we had to guess what is that, what it represents, and what emotions it starts with us. So we started discussions, laughing, there was really a lot of joy. And I don't know how it comes, but we very well guessed what the piece of art represented, and our discussion brought us to the perception that if we are very attentive, if we communicate properly, we will find out the joint solutions that make all of us happy. If we do not communicate, if our power is centralized with the top leaders and the crisis strengthens this phenomenon, unfortunately, in the majority of the crisis. And so if we don't communicate and if we don't share this joy, it's really an obstacle, a barrier for putting more beauty to our lives, putting more joy to our lives, and friendship, love, and whatever those positive feelings may mean. So this is my strong appeal for you, people of arts. Bring more joy, more openness, and be more proactive, not just waiting for money and genius.
It's very, this reflection helped me to address 2 important dimensions. One is the use of arts in business for training and development is not completely new. In fact, is particularly for leadership development is something that is going on already by 30 years now. And and from global corporation, but still there is a lot of need in terms of developing new skills and developing new way of being aware of the role, of the responsibility, and working together, which is all. So there are a lot of skills that can be learned only practicing and being engaged in a completely different environment. Regarding the global corporation, what the arts can do, the global corporations are now in the situation that they are realizing more and more that they need to count on the creativity, imagination of their people, because innovation is becoming faster. They don't have the cycle life of the product is shrinking, and a lot of the innovative idea comes very often from the people, of the capacity of working with externally, and there are many other forms, or the concept of open innovation, crowdfunding, but many other dimensions. So the point anyway is to make the people resilient, is to make more less machine-like system component and more human being engage with their brain, providing their contribution, and be part of the organization as an organic system. And that is where arts come in play. So this is, again, from the arts point of view, from the business point of view, explaining why business should be using arts. From cultural point of view, and then I give there is one of the colleagues asking, the audience asking for, is important also to understand how this can be, how to design, how the arts can be applied to the problems, and what are the benefits. And this is the point that Agatha basically was pointing out. It is important to, and this is what there is a lot of lack of attention in measuring the impact, making the impact visible, somehow justify the value that is created through the adoption of the arts. And this is something that needs to be done, and this is the methodologies that are part already adopted by the business world, but there are also methodologies that we are developing also from a research point of view to assess, because it's true that there is there's been already a lot from academic point of view around social innovation, social capital, intellectual capital, but there are a lot of dimensions that needs to be still explored. So for example, if I bring artists within an organization, doing arts in residence, in order to stimulate a different way of thinking and operating, working within the organization, how this is changing the organizational behavior, and how this organizational behavior is producing some evident impact within the organization. So this kind of dimension needs to be disclosed and understood. Most of the organization today, going back to the point that I think Mikkel was making before, if I'm not wrong with the name, because we introduced each other at the beginning of this talk, most of the are what I call observer. So they see the arts there, we are here. From time to time we collaborate, but we are two different entities, two different animals, and we don't have really a lot to do. We are cultural organization, we are business, and we are observing each other. Then there are what I call adapters. There are organizations that adapt some dimension of arts in some parts of their business, in some parts of their value chain. That is good for, so that they use for CSR, they use for marketing, they use for design and research and development. They use arts as a kind of component that they apply where they need in order to solve some dimension. But they still make business as they used to be, as a kind of traditional approach. Then there are few organizations that are integrators. Are those organizations that are trying to make the arts part of their everyday activities. And one example is this Italian organization that I was mentioning, Elica. And then for those that are interested, I can send you a chapter of a book where I present the case study, where arts is part of their everyday life. So arts is used in whatever they do, from design, from marketing, from training, from the meeting of the board, from communicating the strategy, whatever they do. So the point is that is adopting new principles that are not typical rational or rational business principles. So they try to engage there. So according to these three categories, CSR is a good way and a potential, particularly for cultural organization, to start the conversation with businesses. But then what I would suggest, and actually CSR is very good, because if you start with CSR, you can very quickly go on the board and then talk with the top management. But then you have to be careful as a cultural organization or arts organization, don't get somehow limited, constrained in the box of CSR. And then try to understand if they are just sponsoring an event, a festival, or whatever, which is good for society at large, or they are really trying to make the culture and change themselves through this relationship. And my experience, particularly in some traditional business, that they promote the change, but then there is resistance. Why? Because now we can discuss about the reasons, but the problem then becomes more a kind of academic conversation. I don't want to go to that level.
There are Polish examples of such a deep involvement.
Well, actually, I didn't have here with me, but the example I was giving about Elika having here in a manufacturing unit, they run one business arts-based project right in Poland. And actually, I have also the video where it's a 15 minutes, but they've been using here as an Italian company using in a Polish manufacturing unit, arts-based initiative for engagement of people. Then in terms of mapping other case example, I know there are some collaboration, but more based on CSR rather than on kind of more evolved approach. But again, it's not important now. What is important is to start this collaboration and then over the time to move forward this conversation and try to basically enlarge. In terms of mapping a lot of case study, no, this is not something that I have actually.
I'm asking because I represent the business point of view, actually coming from the company which has very deep problem joining those two areas, let's say. And as far as I know, we are not only one. So I believe that if we are here, that how from the other point, we can say that maybe just look around and learn from the examples, because that doesn't work the way that there's nothing here. I personally know at least I don't know 10 programs in Poland which are very much about what we're saying here today, and about incorporating arts generally deeply into the business structures not only, but daily operations. So
well, this is very good to know. Actually, yesterday I was having the meeting with the National Cultural Center and asking what are, and they were telling me some of the collaboration that they are experiencing or fostering or supporting. But of course, as a researcher, I'm interested. There are different cases. I'm interested to know if there are some showcases, some case example of organization in Poland that are already experiencing this. And of course, please let me know, because this is part of the research activities that I develop. If there are some key case studies, but then as an academic and as a researcher in this area, what I'm promoting is to make this something that, again, goes beyond the single application and becomes more a discipline. As we have arts management in some organizations, what I'm advocating is arts-based management, where instead of having 10 organizations, it becomes something that is a practice of hundreds of organizations and so on. Then is very important to create case example, and particularly to prove the value. And that is the other dimension. Of course, I'm not touching here because this is an open conversation. How to assess. So, for example, I would be interested to know not only if the organization are experiencing training or whatever, but how they are linking and measuring, evaluating, and then linking those initiatives to their business results, how they're really making sense of this initiative in their strategy, linking to the strategy, linking to the achievement of business objectives. So disclosing this dimension is what I'm very much interested, because that is how then we can prove the value of investing in the relationship with the cultural organization. And then the other dimension is help cultural organization or artists to design initiatives and then go to the business and say, what are your problems? We can help you to solve this problem. Of course, there will be people from the business side building the teams with the artists and arts facilitators to design the proper initiative. But how to design these initiatives, most of the organizations are doing it on their own. And there is no discipline yet. Well, this is what we are developing. is very kind of bottom up. So some organization understand they've had some experience and they are building up this experience, and then other organizations look at this working, then they imitate each other, and then maybe in some clusters they do. And then also is what kind of initiative they are doing. So this is on a very important dimension. Okay, I think this is becoming a very long conversation. We started at 5. I can see that there is a lot of engagement. I mean, it's good that I'm surprised that it's 1 hour and a half that there is a so high level of attention. And actually it's good because I don't see people sleeping, which is most of the case.